And imagine if that were you or if that were someone that you loved, how would you feel? What would you do? What kind of resources would you need? What could be done to improve your situation? So with that, I'm going to quickly introduce our panel and launch in. So I introduced Chris, he's the director, Chris Knestrick, the director of NEOCH on the end. Next to him is Toni Johnson. She's the Women's Homeless Outreach Coordinator at the Lewis Stokes Department of Veterans Affairs. Beside Toni is Joyce Robinson. She's volunteer coordinator and free store manager for NEOCH. Then Dori Zaborski, who is an artist and board member at NEOCH. And Rick Smith, beside me, the founder and director of RAKE, Random Acts of Kindness Everywhere, as well as the hashtag Lunchbag Cleveland organization. So to start, actually, Chris, if you could begin by telling us a little bit about NEOCH's mission and activities and how the organization has evolved over time and its relationships to other homeless advocacy groups in Cleveland.
Thank you so much. So I'm new to NEOCH. I'm the new director there. I've been there for about 4 months, but previously I had long relationships working at a drop-in center on the near west side of Cleveland, where I worked with and built relationships with people experiencing homelessness for many years. And NEOCH is unique, and our mission is to organize, empower homeless and at-risk men, women, and children to break the cycle of homelessness through public education, advocacy, relationship with their nurturing environment is ultimately our mission statement. But I think what NEOCH seeks to do, and our advocacy tries to center the voices of those people that have experienced homelessness or currently experiencing homelessness, both at agencies that are providing services to those people and in policy that is being formed at the county and city level. So that work happens in many different facets. Kind of our flagship program would be the creation of a homeless Congress, right? A place that is a unique political space where folks can come together, talk about their experiences in agencies, at women's shelters, at the men's shelter, and come up with possible solutions and then bring those as proposals to the places that make those decisions. NEOCH also does public education. We have a Street Voices program where folks that find sharing their stories of being on the streets or how they overcame homelessness, sharing their stories to universities, different churches, groups like this, exactly what we're here today doing, go out and talk to our community, to talk about the realities and break down stereotypes around homelessness. We also do a large outreach. We coordinate the city's outreach program where people come together to connect with folks that are shelter resistant in our community. Folks that, for many good reasons and some other reasons, don't want to go to the shelters. And so we go and build relationship with them, work with them, and hear their stories and provide whatever items they may need, both if they want to get housing or if they are continually committed to sleeping outside. We'll provide them with the sources to be able to do that and as safe as possible. We do a lot of our work around affordable housing, right? We can't talk about homelessness. We can't talk about if we're not talking about affordable housing in our community. So some of our advocacy is building a framework, talking about looking at trends of affordable housing in the Cleveland area. And then I think NEOCH is both, I would say in my 3-4 months being here, and something about NEOCH plays a unique role in that we believe that the voices of those that are receiving services from agencies have a right to say what is working and what is not in those places, right? What policies are going to impact them in ways that are both positive and negatively. And they have a voice, the premier voice, their voice should be centered in all of those conversations. And that's what NEOCH tries to do. We try to center those voices in policy, in services, in advocacy, and in spaces like this.
Thank you, Chris. Can you talk a little bit about the cycle of homelessness? Specifically, if someone were to become homeless, what is the sort of structural experience they would have in the city? And then some of the ways in which that kind of falls apart to get people right back into the same cycle.
Yeah. So I would say that as we've talked about and you've looked at your different experiences, there's no one uniformed experience of homelessness, right? I can tell you about the young man that I met last 2 nights ago that was recently released from prison and didn't have a place to go. So his decision was to ride the bus all night till 3 a.m. when the buses closed down, and then he would go to the airport, lock himself in the bathroom for an hour, get an hour of sleep, and then get back on the bus. I could tell you there's the experience of a young woman that is visiting drop-in centers, that lives in an abandoned house, chooses not to kind of enter into the system that's in place, but lives in a trap house, right, with 5 other youth that are kind of living in an abandoned house, making a community there, but don't have any stable housing to call home. We can tell you about the single mother that was evicted from their house that called up the county to seek services from coordinated intake, the central place, right? If you're experiencing homelessness and you want services from the county, you need to go to central coordinated intake, which is a name that is problematic in that it just raises so much imagery of prison and institution of other thoughts, but needless to say, they need to go there, and they go there and they say what their need is, and what they'll find is that the women's shelter is full to capacity, right? 167 beds, 200 women slept there last night. They would find that the men's shelter is full to capacity, that there's room, right? The county has a policy that they'll turn no one away. But what that means is when you go to the men's shelter and they find it full, that they ship you across town to sleep on a floor in a church. But if you're a family, you go there and their first thing is to ask you, is there anywhere else you can go? Because the reality is all the family shelters are full, right? And then when you say you have nowhere to go, they'll say you have to go to overflow, the family overflow. And many of you might have seen this in the news over the course of this week, where you go to family overflow and you wait there, and you wait for a month to 6 weeks before you can enter into a family shelter. And when you wait, you're sleeping on a gym floor. And what that means is that you actually don't get any services from the county until you enter into a family homeless shelter. So you wait, sleeping on a gym floor with one woman I met there was a 20-year-old mother, a 4-month-old and a 4-year-old, and she's been sleeping on that gym floor for 1 month. And that's the experience. And I would say that as I've been doing this work, what we've seen is that a young mother with 2 kids is the face of homelessness today in Cleveland, right? Affordable housing from Lakewood to Cleveland Heights is less and less, right? Rents have increased 30% throughout the city, or whether it's gentrification in our inner city neighborhoods that lead to a lack of affordable housing. But that more and more what we see is young women with children ending up homelessness, and with very few options to be given. You enter into the system, I don't know how long I have, so I could keep going. I don't want to take too much time. But I would say that, so the emergency services that are provided to offer people experiencing homelessness right there and then to reduce their crisis are very limited. And that's because what we have is we have a housing first policy in Cleveland, right? A housing first policy that says if you're a single person with a mental illness that has been homeless for 12 months, you will get housing. But those are the requirements that folks need to meet. Or if you're a single person with a mental illness that has been homeless for 3 periods in 4 years for up to 12 months, then you're prioritized to get housing. And so, who are not prioritized are these families coming into our system for lots of different reasons, because there is no permanent supportive housing available to them.
Thank you, Chris. Tony, Tell us a little bit about how and why you got into the work that you do for the VA, and if you had prior experiences with homelessness that encouraged you to work in this arena.
Well, first of all, I'm very impressed to see all these people here today that want to learn more about homelessness in our community. So I applaud you for coming out and being part of this discussion. I started out in working with the homeless population probably in the late 80s, early 90s. When I graduated from Tri-C, I got a job as a drug counselor at the county jail. And I found out that a lot of the people that I was working with there were going out to shelters, that they weren't going back to a house, they were going to a shelter. And at that time, the shelters were more accommodating. We had more of them than we do today. But I saw quickly a correlation between the two populations. And then I was able to get a job with Recovery Resources, who was doing outreach to homeless families, and we were working at a drop-in center, which is now the women's shelter. That's where the first drop-in center really was in Cleveland area, was at that location, 2219 Payne. So I did that for a number of years, and I think one of my brightest spots of accomplishments was that I was able to be the first manager of the first supportive housing program for women in the county. People don't know that, but I thought to myself a couple of years ago, you ought to start saying that, because they ignore the fact. They took it all, it's gone now, and every time I ask about what happened to those 18 units, they tell me, oh, they're out there, they're scattered sites, scattered where. So, but that's how, I really started getting into this homeless factor. Then I started working I started going to shelters and teaching literacy, and of course, that led to a lot of other things. And then eventually I went on back to school and got some more degrees. And I ended up doing that time at the homeless drop-in center. I met a wonderful nurse who went to work for the VA. And she used to tell me all the time, whenever there's a position that comes open at the VA that I think that you can do, I'm going to call you, and I'm going to tell you about it, and you can apply. And so all my career has really been spent with a specialization in women, with women's issues, concerns, problems. That's what I've done. I've pretty much focused on how we can move to the next step, being a woman myself. Now, I've worked with all populations, but I have to say that my specialization has always been with women and women, children, and families. So, about 17 years ago, across the country, the Department of Veterans Affairs decided they were going to reach out to homeless women veterans. So they came up with 10 locations. Cleveland was fortunate enough to get money for one of those. And we started this women's outreach program at the VA. I was the outreach worker, and I had a supervisor. And so we quickly found out that, of course, the Department of Veterans Affairs, the military is male-dominated. So that means that they had very few accommodations for women with children, and I have to say they had virtually none. So we had to go out into the community and kind of work with agencies to kind of develop a place for women veterans to go that had children. And we were fortunate enough to develop a great partnership with the Westside Catholic Center. And we were able to work ourselves into finally being able to get about six spots set aside for women veterans, women with children or single women who found themselves in a homeless state. And of course, the Department of Veterans Affairs accommodates that by paying for each night that a veteran is there. And the one good thing about that is that, we hear this term veteran, but what does that really mean? There's lots of different definitions. And in 1980, the Department of Veterans Affairs decided that if you didn't serve 24 consecutive months, you wouldn't be eligible for all the benefits that are available. For instance, you couldn't use the VA Medical Center unless something happened while you were in the service that caused you to become medically or physically ill, and then you could use the VA. But typically, you have to serve 24 months, and that's where we are right now. The good thing about our outreach program is that over the years, we've advocated, we've educated some of our politicians about the fact that there's a lot of veterans out there who maybe something happened during their course of duty. They were other than honorably discharged, and they deserve a place to stay as well. And so we've worked with the community to do that, and we have a lot of community partners that do provide services for those veterans, which is a wonderful thing. And I want to just add that in 2008, under the Obama administration, we were able to come up with a program called the HUD-VASH program, which is a program that provides, as most of you probably are familiar with the term Section 8 voucher or Housing Choice voucher, and they set aside 10,000 vouchers for veterans specifically. And they come with case management, so the person has to agree to, be contacted maybe once a month or so by a case manager. But this was a wonderful start to our end to homelessness because we've been able to house so many veterans and families. And the good thing about it is that a veteran can determine who their family is. It doesn't have to be your blood sister, brother, mother. But if you say that this person and I have lived together for the last 18 years, then that's who your family is, and that's who we're going to house. So,
Thank you so much, Tony. Joyce, moving to you as a veteran yourself who has experienced homelessness, share your story with us and how you got out of homelessness and then how you became involved in NEOCH.
Okay, yes, as Tony and Megan said, I am a veteran, but I also like to introduce myself as a single, senior, female, African American, unemployed, overeducated, formerly homeless veteran. And I use all of those different demographics because right here in this one body, I'm representing 7 different demographics. I've been working with NEOCH as the volunteer coordinator and as we call it, the free store manager. The free store is where we organize donations of hygiene kits, boots that we buy, tents, sleeping bags, that kind of thing that the outreach workers use, that the outreach workers get from us and provide to their clients who are shelter resistant. One of the things that one of the questions people ask us when they donate is, well, how can we help the homeless? How can we educate them? And I have to say, whoa, I have a master's degree. And I had a master's degree when I became homeless. As a matter of fact, I was telling Tony and the rest of the panelists that I did a timeline of my life. And I'm 59 and a half. But I figured out the percentages of, my life. And I am not a numbers person, which is one reason why I refuse to get a PhD, because I could care less about research and stats. But my own housing history, 22% of my life I spent with my nuclear family, meaning my parents, my brother, and I. 41% of my life I spent doubled up. Some of you, if you're living with your parents or your grandparents or a cousin or a friend, you're homeless. If your name is not on the lease and your name is not on the deed to that house, it's not yours, you're homeless. And as Chris was saying, when you go to coordinated intake, they're going to ask, is there some place you can go? That's called diversion. So if you're living with family or friends, that's diversion. So 41% of my life I spent doubled up. 33% of my life, my daughter and I spent in our own place. My name was on the lease. 2% of the time I spent in a shelter, and 2% of my life I spent in the military. As Tony mentioned, in 1980, it was changed where you had to have 24 months in order to be considered a veteran. I was in from 1979 to February of 1980, so that didn't apply to me. I was kind of slid in under the door, which I'm grateful for. Also, I was very fortunate to be housed in what my former boss called the Cadillac of shelters, Westside Catholic. And I absolutely loved it there. It was a wonderful place for me to fall apart and build myself back up and get myself back together. While I was there, being a veteran, I became involved in a program at VA called Incentive Work Therapy to kind of get us reacclimated to being employed. And also while I was there, Tony told me about the opportunity at NEOCH, so I applied there. I'm grateful that I went through the steps that I went through, the homelessness, going through VA, and then going to NEOCH, because it's one thing to be homeless and in need of services. It's another to be on the other side providing the services. People have a stereotype of what a homeless person is like. They think that homeless people are, they choose to not work, they're lazy, they're uneducated. I disagree. I became homeless one time while I was working on my master's degree. I was evicted from my home on January 14th, so I moved in with my mom. January 15th, I started my degree. So that was January. June of that year, after leaving my mom's house and staying with a friend, I stayed in a motel for 3 weeks. Then I found my own spot. I graduated with a Master's of Education from Cleveland State, December 14th of that year, with a 3.73 GPA, and my classmates had no idea that for 6 months I was homeless. And during that time, I missed one class, and that was when my furniture was being delivered to my apartment. So people think, well, Joyce, you have degrees, you shouldn't be homeless. Yeah, well, if I lived somewhere else, I'd have a job. But it takes money to get to Portland, Oregon, or to Seattle, Washington, or to Los Angeles, California. Here in Cleveland, it's difficult for me to get work. I think that with my situation, I was grateful that at the time I became homeless, my daughter was an adult. She was on her own, because in the shelter I saw young women who were pregnant, young women with children, young women who became pregnant after they were in the shelter. I see 4 on a regular basis now who still have their children, who still have their places, which 3 years later is a big deal, because so many people, they lose their housing because it's a process, it's a transition that you go through. People think of homelessness as just losing your house and losing your things. It's more than that. You lose a piece of yourself. And it takes a whole lot to try to get that back. I've been housed for 2.5 years. But like I said, I was in the shelter for 14 months. The first month I was out of the shelter, it took me 2 weeks to realize that I did not have to use bleach in my water to clean my kitchen and my bathroom every day. Because at the shelter we had chores, and every night we used bleach in our water to clean the shelter. So for 429 days, I was used to putting bleach in water when I cleaned the kitchen and when I cleaned my area. I also had to be in at 6 o'clock. It was a good 2 months after I was housed before I had to stop looking at my watch thinking, oh, I gotta be back at 6. Because I was so used to that routine. And something that people don't think about is before you get to that point, you have your routine. Then when you're homeless, you have to readjust your routine. Then when you become housed, you have to readjust again. It's another transition. People erroneously believe that because you have housing, you're okay. No, you're not, because you still have to make that transition. And I still have family members that I'm trying to get this in. And just because I have a house, I'm not okay. I'm better than I was, but I'm not where I was prior to. I'm a different person. I had to overcome feelings of shame, because we all do. We lost, it's like, okay, I've lost this, I'm a loser. You know, I have nothing going for me, I'm a screw up. You have feelings of worthlessness. And I was going to, well, I still go to a counselor. And I remember a discussion with her where she says, Joyce, how are you feeling? I said, I'm feeling worthless. She says, is that the word you want to use? And I said, yeah, right now. Yeah. She said, could it be that you just feel unproductive? And then I thought again, I said, okay, maybe that was it. But when I said I felt worthless at that moment in time, that's how I felt. When I would take public transportation and go back to the shelter, I would get off one stop before the shelter because I didn't want anybody to know where I was going. There's that feeling of shame. It's like I did something wrong. But and I didn't want people to know I was in a shelter. But I could tell when I was beginning to get stronger because I didn't care. And I tell people in a minute, yes, I'm in a shelter. I lost my house. Yes, I am working part-time. And there are people out there panhandling. You got some money? No. Get a job like I do. Well, I'm homeless, so am I. But I'm out there doing something. You can find something, but don't dictate to me how to spend my money. And another stereotype, people don't think that everybody out there that's asking for money is homeless. Because I'll tell you, homeless people have issues with trust. Those outreach workers have to work very hard to get those who are shelter resistant to trust them, that they will help them and not take advantage of them. So those people that you see out there, oh, give, 9 times out of 10, they're not homeless. Because the homeless are very reluctant to ask for assistance.
Thank you so much for sharing that. Dory, I want to move to you. Your work has been rotating behind us on the looping PowerPoint. You are an artist, and you have experience with homelessness, and perhaps have other things that you would like to share about. Tell us your story, and in particular, how do you use art to express your perspectives of the world, your experiences? How does your art reflect you?
Thank you, and I want to thank everyone for coming, and I am a low talker, so yell at me if you need me to talk louder. But I am currently homeless and staying at the shelter, and I don't really view myself as an artist when I see what everybody else does, but I do try to copy everything as much as possible. The main reason I got into art really was an outlet, because to give you a realistic picture of the shelter, there's times where there's no heat, where they keep the water cold. Ambulances are constantly being called. People are overdosing. In management, just says it doesn't matter, it's just a shelter. We're not required to do anything for you. So that's why I really, took art as therapy. So needless to say, I have a lot of issues, whether they be both mental and physical. And I'm not ashamed to say I'm homeless, but I do have the trust issues for sure based on the everyday environment that I have to be in. But I like to use color as a means to express the world that I see and let the brush become an instrument that relays my feelings. My favorite medium is acrylics, but when you are homeless, you spend a lot of time being told to get out. So I do a lot of trips and do what I call treasure hunting, and then try to think of different projects that I'm going to do.
When you're thinking about the experiences of the shelter and the people that you're around, what role would art or other kinds of artistic disciplines other than visual art, does it play a role in addition to yourself in the shelter, do people use music and other things to improve their outlook or to deal with their situation? In what way does culture get used by the people that you're with?
I think it allows people to have a chance to express themselves, because I think oftentimes as a homeless person, you don't feel you have a means of expression. A lot of times what's encouraged is just sitting there and staring at a wall and doing nothing. So when people come in and take that time and give people a chance to express themselves, because you don't have to speak the same language, music, art, it's all universal. And it kind of puts everybody on that same plane, and you don't feel like you're just a homeless person.
Great, thank you. Rick, you also have experiences with homelessness that in some ways differ from what we've heard already. Can you share with us your story and then how it led you to create the organizations that you now run that are kind of groups in service of homeless people?
Sure. My name is Rick. Hi, guys. They're a little cold. Hey, Rick. My name is Rick. Hi, guys. There we go. I'm amazed that so many people came out, by the way. This is
amazing.
Unreal. So, as she stated, I'm a university school grad here in Cleveland, went to Morehouse, and was married, happily married, and went through a pretty abrupt divorce, and ended up homeless. Never would have imagined in a million years I would be, divorced. I lived in San Diego. I have a mom and dad, sister who was a vice president at the time for First Energy, sister who was a doctor, married to a doctor. But for me, it was embarrassment. I could have simply called my mom and dad and said, hey, I'm going through divorce or this or that. But for me, I was way across the country in California and not knowing what to do. Not knowing, I'd never experienced something waking up and not knowing where to live, where I'm going to sleep. And to these ladies' point, for me, it was embarrassment. It was a sense of hopelessness and figuring out. A year I lived in a car, and I would get a gym membership where I would shower. I had 2 jobs. I'm a comedian by trade and a TV writer, but it was never being able to get over the hump. It was, hey, this happens, my cell phone's off. We can laugh at this story, but I was living in my car got repossessed. So I joked that they took my stereo system, my living room, my dining room, all the stuff in one swoop. It didn't matter, and it came to a point where I go, you know what, I'm gonna go back to Cleveland. I'm just gonna, this Hollywood thing isn't working. I can't figure this out. A buddy of mine goes, you know what, just stay on my couch. So I got a bike, and I started biking everywhere in LA, going for auditions, things of that sort, and my bike got stolen. So I was like, you know what, this has to be a sign. It has to be, you know what, I quit. I had $20 left to my name, and I was gonna call my mom and dad who were in the audience on a Monday and say, you know what, I'm done. And I went to Little Caesars. I would go to Little Caesars pizzas, the $5 pizzas, and I took the $20 to be honest with you, screw you to God. And I go, you know what, just take whatever you have, I'm done. And I bought 4 $5 pizzas. I started handing them out to homeless people in Cleveland. Funny enough, the first person I handed out a slice to was vegan. He goes, oh, I don't want that.
California.
This is a tough crowd here. And I wouldn't have started a nonprofit if that had been that. But I had a social media following. The whole thing when I was homeless, to your point of, not people knowing or embarrassed, no one knew I was homeless. So I had this Twitter following that people would laugh and joke, and I was writing with David Spade and all these celebrities, and I'm going to these parties, this and her. I would joke that I was either eating at 5-star restaurants or eating 99-cent cheeseburgers. But no one knew this thing. My mom and dad didn't know, families didn't know, people. I had this crazy following on Twitter and Instagram. And at the time when I did the pizzas, I took my phone and I Snapchat, a homeless pizza party with my friends. And little did I know, at the time, 8 other people in 8 other cities did the same thing within an hour. They went and got pizzas and did pizzas for homeless people. And I remember, I kid you not, the next day, I got a call from Adult Swim saying that my TV writing gig that I was hoping for, I got. And I was like, all right, God, I guess we got to keep doing this thing. And that was 4 years ago. And just for me, it was a face of homelessness I never experienced. You think of homeless, you think people on the street or people panhandling, people are, down and out, or people without education, this and that. But for myself, it was something that I had stumbled in this world, but it still was a face, or still was something that I need encouragement, or never getting over the hump, or working 2 jobs, or staying with somebody and then they got evicted, or this or that, or this getting stolen. So for me, it was an element of, hey, I want to help homeless people. I want to do it in a way that it kind of humanizes homeless people. That it's not a they, it's not a them. We are in a society now where we don't want to say all whites do this, or all blacks do this, or all women, but we still throw homeless people. All homeless people are this way, or all homeless do this. And you hear it constantly. Why don't they just go get a job, or why don't they get a home? But each individual story is individual, and so a lot of times, once a day, or I'll go out and I'll find a homeless person on the street, and I'll take them myself to dinner, or I'll tell their story. I'll give them a blanket, give them a hug, but just to share that story with their permission. But to people sitting at home, or on their Instagram and taking selfies and this and that, but say, hey, here's a guy just like us who might have lost something, or I talked to you before. For me, it was divorce. My mom and dad been married 47 years. My sister's married 20 years, and my sister's married 15 years. I had never experienced what divorce would have been like. And there's support groups for alcoholism. There's support groups for cancer survivors. There's so many support groups, but I personally had never heard of a divorce support group. And so when I went through it, it was like taboo. I couldn't mention it. I couldn't say anything. It was embarrassing because the person I'm divorcing is my best friend. It is the person who will help me get through this. So for me, it was just this whole weight of the world of me trying to figure out what's going on. And I say that to say a lot of the homeless people I deal with locally, and I travel 50 cities in 30 days, twice a year. My organization, Random Acts of Kindness Everywhere. And a lot of the experience I experience with people are people who never got over losing something, sometimes divorce. As simple as, 52% of people who get married get divorced. But it's just that taboo thing of, you have to be macho, you have to be strong, you have to get over this person, divorce parties, and I didn't care about this person, I care about that. So for me, it was that element of just getting over the hump of divorce, and then embarrassment and shame, and how did I get here, and things of that sort. My divorce actually finalized on Valentine's Day. So I actually did stand up that night at the world famous comedy, the Comedy Store in LA. But it was an experience that I never imagined I would be in. I didn't know that being in university school or going to Morehouse, that I would have to figure out to use this Bible gift for a free coupon. I have to use this coupon now to get another sandwich later, or things that I'm figuring out on the fly. Like I said, the gym membership, I learned a silly way that at 5 in the morning in LA, most people are there that aren't working out, or they're taking a shower because they're still functional. They're still trying to go to their jobs. I learned how to steam a suit in a shower. So I'm literally showering, I'm steaming my suit. At the time, when you first moved to LA, I did a thing, background work. So you guys see TV shows and movies, the guys just walking in the background. You make $8 an hour, but it was like my first job out there. So I'm literally doing Scandal, I'm doing Law and Order, all these TV shows, and I'm wearing the same outfit because I'm homeless, but you got to eat on set. But again, it was things that you try to figure out, and you're trying to make your way instead of just making one phone call to the mom and dad who are saying, Rick, you don't have to be this way, you don't have to do this. But, and it's self-inflicted. I could have simply called home or got a plane ticket or asked for friends. At the time, I think I had 6,000 to 7,000 followers that follow me on Instagram and Twitter, but just on my own, ashamed, if you will. But it led me to start Random Acts of Kindness Everywhere, and the movement, hashtag lunch back here in Cleveland, but showing people that when you hand a lunch to a homeless person, ask them how they're doing. I tell everyone I deal with to have 5 corny jokes. So like, what does a nosy pepper do? Get hot up in your business. So it sounds cheesy, but for me, that's just an entry point to make somebody feel okay that I'm gonna have this conversation. I remember one of the first experiences I had in LA with a homeless person. I was wearing all Cleveland Browns, everything. And the gentleman goes, thank you for the lunch, I appreciate it. I'm gonna pray for you. I'm thinking, why are you gonna pray for me? He goes, I'm homeless. I can find a house, but you're a Browns fan. But for me, it was a taboo, just thinking all homeless people are, mental health disease or they're this or that. It's people who are sharp with sports, people who are sharp with this and that, this and that. And I personally, and I'm dumb from this, I'd never experienced that. So with Rake and my organization, I try to put the two together to say, hey, don't be afraid of this person, don't be afraid of the situation, and to go to the works that these guys are doing, to kind of trick them into doing bigger and greater things like these guys are doing on the stage.
Thank
Sorry.
you. No, that was great. I just want to note that on Saturday, December 2nd, our next free day, we're going to be working with #LunchBagCleveland in the morning and doing a Four Freedoms program on food insecurity in the afternoon. So those of you who are interested in participating in that, which is a lunch-making engagement that you then go out and deliver lunches to homeless people, you'll be able to come back here on December 2nd and work with Rick and his team for that.
Yeah, every last Sunday of the month we've done about 1,000 to 1,200 lunches. We've done it for 4 years. We've actually single-handedly, and these guys can speak more on it, we single-handedly, I like to say it's not the lunches we give to the people, it's the hope. So we single-handedly, because of a lunch, it's just a simple sandwich, chips, apple, water, cookies. We've got 4 or 5 documented people off the streets just from sharing their story, getting them jobs in the neighborhood, and then from that, them being able to get off the streets and stuff like that. So it seems small, but it's so much, like you said, it's hope. It's literally hope, just giving that person some beacon or let them know that they're cared for. And one more thing that I think is the coolest thing, when I started raking #LunchBag, we deal with a lot of people that my organization doesn't realize that are basically homeless. And for me, it was when I first started raking, part I didn't talk about was I actually volunteered more than I ever volunteered before. So here I am really technically with nothing, but it gave myself, even with nothing, a sense of worth. That even though I don't have much, I still can help somebody else. I still am remotely funny. I still can tell jokes. I still can do something that gave some people, that let them know they care, but also I got something back from it. And that was, to me, something I never experienced before, having lost everything. Sorry, I'm done.
That's great. I have more questions, but I'm also aware that there's a great audience out here. Does anyone have questions that they'd like to ask? There is a microphone right here if you can get to it. Otherwise, if you're up front, I'm happy to give you my mic for the moment. Did you have one?
Hi, my name is Nada Abu, and I'm a grad student, music studies program at Syracuse University. We're here to visit Cleveland museums, and we're also interested in attending this panel discussion, which is great because it's also related to things that I'm involved to. So there is first of all, I'm from Syria, and many of you know there is a big attack against bringing refugees here. And people think because there is homeless, we can't bring refugees. And I know this is a very big issue because it's a very sensitive thing that everyone is suffering from, like being without a home, without a shelter, without food. And I understand all your experiences and really respect it because like being strong enough and trying to not being in the hole to fight something, which is really, which is not easy at all because like traveling, leaving my country, coming here was a very hard experience too. So my question is, do you think refugee crisis, like taking care of refugee crisis is against taking care of homelessness here? So this is my, like I know homeless people are, but like being involved in giving care to homeless, does it affect refugee crisis or vice versa? So, yeah, to any one of you.
Thank you. So the relationship of immigration and refugees in particular to the sort of the plight of the homeless who are perhaps native Clevelanders. I don't know if any of you, perhaps Chris, if this is an issue that comes up.
Yeah. So first of all, I think we, like, our society, our culture builds this framework of a scarcity model, right? That we live in, that there's not enough for everyone. And I would challenge that and say that, like, you know, there is enough for everyone. There's enough to welcome refugees, and there's enough to end homelessness in the United States, in Cleveland, right? Cleveland can be a welcoming community for people that are fleeing violence in their home countries. We can find homes for them, and we can also find homes and housing for everyone that's living in the shelter. So I don't do this work out of a place of scarcity, right? And I actually don't believe that we should function out of a place of scarcity. There's enough to go around, right? But it's a matter of like political decisions that make it feel like there's never enough for everyone, right? And I think Random Acts of Kindness, your work would testify to that. I hear that.
100%, I think.
There is enough. There's enough pizza when you have $20 to share, right?
Well, it Depends. But yeah. No, but to your point, I don't think, you know, coming to a country to be safe should ever be an issue. I mean, we're all humans. I don't think it should be a matter of, do we have more socks to give somebody whose country is at, you know, distress. I mean, this is what this country's kind of, not to get too political, but this country's kind of founded on freedom and things of that sort. I would be remiss to say don't come to our country because we don't have enough pizza slices.
Structurally though, Chris, if someone was a refugee, would they go through the same process if they were homeless as a native Clevelander? Would they have to go to coordinated intake, or do they sort of go through a different sort of civic or you know, city line to get services?
Tony, do you know that?
I know.
I mean,
Angela knows.
Angela could say, I would say there's specific services like, you know, there's the for refugees, right? Those that qualify and are defined, you know, within the framework of coming as refugees that they're offered that native Clevelanders don't have, right? If someone that's a refugee entered into the homeless system through coordinated intake, they would be able to receive services from the homeless services offered by the county, but they would probably be directed directly to the refugee services within the city. That would be my general answer. I don't know if Angelo has something different.
A lot of times they're resistant to go to a refugee center because they don't have documentation. They're scared of being reported. And what we found is we still give them services. They still go to work. Amazingly, they find work without IDs. And we've had 3 men that I know for sure have gotten housed in the last 2 years who are refugees. Most of the refugees we see here in the Cleveland area are Latin-speaking refugees from south of the border. Not just Mexico, but Ecuador, the whole 9 yards. And so we use Casa Ama, is it? It's on the west side, to get an interpreter to help discuss ways of moving that person along without them being deported. So we're very supportive. Our area itself is very supportive of refugees. As I said in the beginning, we find ways to help them without getting immigration involved until we can secure the right documentation.
Thank you. Yeah.
Megan, I think there's some people waiting.
Oh, I'm sorry. Okay, so I will, go ahead. You go ahead, Emmett.
I like to simplify things. I think that our foundation is really screwed in many ways. That's why there is homeless in the first place. When you think about it, we can't even count votes for our government. The foundation is what's wrong. We have more houses that are vacant and empty than we have people sleeping on the streets. Why is that? I think it's ridiculous. I think that there should be programs where homeless people could actually get a house and fix it up and improve the neighborhood, keep the house from going into the landfills. I think that if the Earth were the Titanic, the first thing you would want to do is support the Titanic from sinking in the ocean because you need to save everyone. Secondly, you'd want to save the people on the ship. Thirdly, you might ask, what country are they from? I think that I just think that as human beings, we should all have our priorities set straight, and they are the Earth, the humans, and life on this planet, and that's what it should be.
I'd like to just make a couple comments about that, because one of the things that over the 25 plus years that I've been doing this work is that I found that we have very few prevention programs. So say for instance, if you're in your home and you're behind a couple of months rent, we don't have ready resources to be able to assist you with staying in your home. So lots of times they become homeless, and then we've got to start the process all over again. We got to get you a bed now. Everything is lost because we didn't have the prevention resources. So we need to focus on, as a country and a community, more prevention programs that would help people stay in their house, to help them to pay their lights and gas bills so that they don't have to become on the streets again. And we should also be thinking about when we're putting people into housing, you're putting people into an empty room because they go into this apartment, yeah, so you paid my rent and my first month's security. I don't have a bed to sleep on. I don't have a couch. I don't have any dishes. And sometimes if they go into a place where it's not furnished with a gas stove or electric stove or refrigerator, how are you going to store your food? So I got a food stamp card, but what happens with that? So I got to go and buy cold cuts every day because I have nowhere to store my food. So I don't think that we think about a lot of times about so we fix it, you know, it's all good, it's Christmas, I'm going to do what I can. I'll help the homeless this year, and then I'll wait till next Christmas, 2018, and come back. But we need to do some things in between. And one of those things is we should do a lot more with housing readiness, teaching people some things, because I found, you know, everybody doesn't know how to write a check, they don't have a bank account. There's so many things that we take for granted, and we don't prepare people. We just say, here, we're going to pay your first month's rent and security deposit, see you later. But we leave out a lot of facts. Got a $3,000 gas bill. Tell me about that. So, you know, there's things that we need to be doing that we're not really doing. So I believe strongly in a housing readiness program. I do groups twice a month at the VA where we talk about resources that are out there. Talk about renter's insurance. You know, how big is that? So people don't even think about, well, the landlord should be responsible if something happens to my TV. No, they're not. So these are just small things that a lot of us take for granted, but these are really big issues when you've never been housed, never lived on your own. Maybe you came out of foster care. I meet women all the time that went into the military because they were 18 and couldn't stay in their foster care anymore. So when they get out of the military, what do you think happens? Something changed? A miracle? No. You're still homeless. You still don't have a family. And so here we are. So those are just some things that I just needed to share about that because we take a lot of things for granted.
Thank you, Tony. That was great. Sir?
So thanks much to the panel for your personal stories and the services that are available. And thanks to MOCA for having this event. But I also want to hear or sort of comment on structural issues that contribute to this. And thinking about particularly that there's been an incredible analysis done by Dan Kerr in a book called Derelict Paradise, Homelessness in Urban Development. And that covers the years 1877 to 2007. It does an incredible analysis of the structural issues perpetrated by city government to create and use homelessness as a part of their agenda for development. So the downtown playground and the gentrification issues are all hit there, and it started 1877, and it goes to 2007. So I, in some sense, want the panel to sort of talk about that or encourage a deeper analysis that our choices on policy, and that it's not just a recent development, it is a long-standing agenda. Please speak to that.
Thank you. Chris, do you want to talk a little bit about
I mean, I think the question is timely. I think there's this work that we need to do is that we need to say that, you know, people experiencing homelessness each have their unique story, right? And you've heard those stories here today. And each person becomes homeless because of some experience they had in their lives that is unique to them. But then we can't ignore other larger issues in our society when we talk about homelessness, right? There's no way we can ignore the fact that upwards to 80% of the women living at the women's shelter are black. And what is the structural racism that is causing that in our society, right? We can't ignore the fact that vouchers are clustered in communities, and then we concentrate poverty in those communities that are predominantly black communities, right? And those are structural issues that are part of this story, that tell us why is the women's shelter so underfunded in our community? You know, and when a group comes up and asks, saying, we will run the women's shelter, but we need more money to do it, And if not, we can't do it, and the county says no, we continue to have poor services being provided to marginalized communities, mostly that are being used, those services being used by people of color, right? And those are issues of structural racism. I think other issues that, like Mike, I think you're right. I think the idea that, you know, they say that to afford a one-bedroom apartment here in this city, you need to make $12 an hour, right? And you could, that would still be rent burdened, but you could do that. The minimum wage in Ohio is $8.10. And that means that a mother with 2 kids have to work 60 hours a week to be able to afford an apartment in our community. And so, you know, and there was this period of time where, like, if we consider housing as a human right? Housing is not a human right in our society. It is something to be bought and to be sold, to be able to make money off of, right? Housing is no longer a right. It is a commodified thing that should be sold to make profit. And I think those issues are all part of this history, part of what causes homelessness, right? Until we begin to have a society, a culture that says housing is a right, instead of something to be built to build wealth in our community for a small group of people. Like, homelessness will continue, right? And I think that's some of the story, right, Mike? When you think of the history of the fires of white landlords burning their homes to sell the land, to make money, to flee the city in white flight, like the idea that the commodification of homes to build wealth for one section of our community in Cleveland, white people, like, that's part of the story, right? And that is the reason why we need to have these conversations. But that doesn't in any way eliminate the individual stories around people that are experiencing homelessness today. But it broadens the work that needs to be done by our society to really end homelessness.
Hi. Yeah, I mean, we can build these ginormous hospital systems. We can build sports stadiums. I mean, where are the priorities in this community? I mean, I'm a drug and alcohol counselor and I'm a case manager, and one of the things that I come to work and makes me cringe is when one of my clients comes up to me and says, "I need housing." It's like right away migraine city, because there is nothing. So I also sit on the board of the Women's Wellness Foundation, which we just opened up a Denami House, which provides housing for women in recovery. And I just want to know, what is this community going to do? I mean, we could talk all day long, but what am I supposed to tell my clients I had to send a woman, one of my clients, and her kids to Akron because there was no place for her to go. She's in a domestic violence situation. There's absolutely nothing in Cuyahoga County. What do they say? What are our politicians here saying? Why can we have all this money in this community for sports and hospitals, but yet people are living on the streets? People can't afford to go to these things anyways because nobody has any money, there's no jobs. I mean, what are they doing about it? What can I go on Monday morning and say to my clients who are homeless or who need to get out of a domestic violence situation? Oh, sorry, we have nothing. You call, everybody says, call 211. Guess what? 211 is useless. Useless. They read from a list of places that have nothing. I mean, it's why would anybody want to come to Cleveland? And why would anybody want to come to Cleveland? There's nothing here.
So this is an important statement to be made a few days before an election, certainly. So I think one thing all of us can do is understand to our local officials who are running what their positions are, and particularly in Cuyahoga County and Cleveland proper, on some of these important issues. And I know that NEOCH and other organizations are advocates at the civic level with the government to try and affect change where possible. but it is difficult. I mean, I think as everyone here has shared, even in getting out, the challenges are real, particularly if they're added to by things like sexual abuse, domestic violence. The opioid crisis and drug addiction is an incredible problem that's also sort of layering on top of this. So we're going to have these last 2 questions, and then we'll be closing. Sir.
Can I just say something?
Please.
NEOCH does have clevelandhousing.org, which is our affordable housing website that we push out there. So that's one place to look at for affordable housing. And that I would also say that NEOCH also does, we spend thousands and thousands of dollars a year, a month almost, on paying people's utilities and doing other things that we talk about. So but they're really small, right? And the scope of the problem is huge. So I just want to name that, we recognize these, and we're trying to put Band-Aids on open wounds, right?
Okay. And to your point, we talked about this before we came up here. I like to look at the individual part of it. I mean, you can get so buckled down. I'm 100% what the young lady just said. There's a bigger issue. But my thing is, for example, kind of side note, we took 100,000 plus bottles of water to Flint, and I had all this backlash. Not a lot, but people go, "Oh, that's not helping to fix the pipes. That's not helping, the long term of the lead in the water." And my thing was, how do I tell the person we drove the semi trucks to Flint, the guy that is working full time, that he uses bottled water to shower? So we get buckled down and say, "Oh, don't help the homeless on the street," or don't do that. My thing is, we're still individuals. So if there's a guy that that, like you said to your point, might need rent done or paid for, take care of that person. I remember a buddy of mine, and this is not to belittle, I talk off the cuff a lot of times, but a buddy of mine had raised $700 for cancer. He was going to give it to this cancer awareness society. I go, you know what? How cool would it be if you found somebody you knew with cancer and use that money to pay for her bills? So that's what a lot of times, on a bigger level, I'm all for Rick as a 501c3 and this and that, and I would love somebody to give a $20 million grant, this and that. But my thing is just look to the person next to you. If you know somebody in your neighborhood, a family member, a cousin, an uncle, etc., why not help that person out? Because that's the whole thing when we talk about hope. You wake up and you say, what am I going to do today? My pills and this and that. But we all individually can do something in our own level, in our own way that we can do to combat it ourselves. If you can get one person off the street, or one person's bills, or one person to learn how to write a check, or one person, you can help with, you find a job. That's my whole background. My voice is quivering because that's my whole existence. Just help the person you can next to you. Together we'll figure out the bigger things, but let's at the small level. We can all leave here. There might be a homeless person outside. We all walk by him. Let's figure out what's his story, get his name, or what's his family doing. I'm sorry, Chris.
Sir.
I want to go back to this gentleman's question about the number of vacant houses in the city and in the country, and how we could end. Why couldn't we end homelessness with the amount of abandoned properties, and have the homeless work on those properties to rehabilitate them? And there is that effort going forth. I want to bring this up because I want to touch on a bigger point. There is that effort going forth. Laura's Home, which houses women and children, have a program like that. They have 2 houses that they've rolled out, and they're in the process of putting 2 more houses back on the market for women in their shelter. And the bigger point is, there are a lot of passionate and compassionate people that are giving of their time to work on the problems of homelessness in the city, the various problems, everything from women and children to the women's shelter, to the shelter-resistant homeless. And this is a request of people here, because you must have an interest in this subject, to get involved. We can talk about political will, but there's also the will of the people. Because if we wait on the politicians to solve these problems, we'll be waiting forever. So there comes a time where we as individuals have to come up, rise up, and do something about these issues. So I urge you, if you have an inkling of doing this, contact the City Mission, contact NEOCH, contact Metanoia Project. These are organizations that are working to solve these problems.
Thank you so much for sharing that.
I'd like to add something real quick about that. You know, in Cuyahoga County, we have an Office of Homeless Services, and they have some people appointed board members, but it's about choices also, because it's just what Paul said about getting involved. People don't really know the decisions that are made sometimes within your own county that affect people. So one of those, and I might not be completely correct about this, but I do know that 15 years ago, we had ample shelters and transitional housing programs. And I do know that today, we've lost over 400, 300 beds in that area. We used to have women's shelter on the east side. We had 2 or 3 domestic violence shelters. We don't have that now. And it was one of the choices made was that we were going to build 10,000 units of housing for single, mentally ill, or disabled persons, which they're doing a fine job of that. But they forgot about the other population, the people that needed 2 years, 18 months to 2 years to kind of get back on their feet. They forgot about that group. They forgot about the growing number of women and children. So yeah, we're doing a great job in some cases with these single folks, but we forgot about those others. And the average homeless person is probably 9 years old. Not an adult, but a child. And we've forgotten about that population. So I want you to all go on the Cuyahoga County website and look up the Office of Homeless Services. See what their documentation says about what they're doing in Cuyahoga County. They deny that there's an issue when you can come past 17th and Superior any evening and see families sitting on that stoop waiting for a bus to come and take them to the City Mission. And yes, there are places that are doing a lot of things like Dione House. There's the Land Bank. There's a lot of different agencies, programs that have been able to acquire properties that were up for demolition and renovate them and put people in them, but it's not enough. So we need more help, and we need every one of you. Talk to your neighbor. You know, people say, well, I'm not going to rent. He was formerly homeless. She was formerly homeless. Well, you don't know who's living next door to you anyway. So what's the difference? So we all can become better advocates to help people get off the street.
Thank you, Tony. Sir.
A lot of my thunder got stolen, but I'm glad it happened, because that was good. So I may be repeating what just happened. But yeah, it's the key. We have to quit depending on others to solve this problem, because obviously the government doesn't really care. You see where they put their money at certain sections. This is a classic example. This neighborhood, University Circle, is growing, great neighborhoods to the east and the west, and they'd rather keep it that way. So we have to work with each other, because we're all connected, whether we believe it or not. If something happens now, we're all affected. And that's the way it always is. So as soon as we stop realizing that, as soon as we stop thinking that we're so separate from this person, because he's homeless, or he's this, or he's that, and realize that we all in this game together, we all got to make this work. Sooner we start doing that, because we say that, but our actions really don't show that. Even I have a problem with that at times. Our actions really don't show that. As soon as we start doing that, it's amazing what kind of results change. It's amazing what kind of problems that. And that's the thing. If you want to help somebody that's homeless, go up to somebody. And now that we know that the face of the homeless isn't that person down there in public square saying, can I get a quarter? That's not the homeless person, trust me. We go up to the person that we know is struggling. Maybe we know somebody that's a couple months behind the rent. Now we know that word that could possibly live. If we have the means to help them in any way, we might not be able to pay their rent, or we can say, hey, you need some food, bring some food over, something small. Don't think nothing's too small, because I'm telling you, I was homeless for 2 years, and when I got this sandwich from somebody, whether it be at Catholic Charities or something, man, that was good. I was holding that bag around all day, because that was like, that hope. It was hope. Like, man, I got a sandwich, I got something to eat, man. You know. So just the little stuff. The little stuff. I don't care. Don't think so big about it because you can't solve everything. We don't have magic wand to make all this go away right away. Little stuff is what.
There's a kid named Kid President. I don't know if you guys are familiar with him. He had this thing that he posted on Instagram, and it said socks are the least received, most requested thing of homeless shelters. And I read it. I was with my mom and dad at the time, and I go, you know what? That seems weird. I actually don't own a pair of socks, which is another story. And so I went out and I bought 100 pairs of socks. And I went and did 10 cities, and I just painted out socks. And the look on the homeless people's face was crazy. So Sierra, my sisters, and people here would rake. The first year we did 20,000 pairs of socks, nationwide hashtag. Last year we did like 100,000 pairs of socks. But it's things like that, to your point, I didn't solve homelessness. I don't want to pat on my back, but it's things that we all have an extra pair of socks. It wasn't that much to do, but it's little things like that that the people like Chris and everyone up here leads the way. But to your point, we can follow the lead. When we make a lunch, we put a note. We write a personalized note. Sometimes it's go Cavs, sometimes a little bit deeper. But to that point, you're giving people hope. So I always encourage people to know that, you know, don't think big. You don't have to be rich. You don't have to be famous. You don't have to be a celebrity. You don't have to, you know, buy a house and put 20 people in it. You literally can do something every single day at your level that you can do. Social media, I deal a lot with the kids. I actually make them take a selfie with a stranger. And it's like, it's not a big deal, but it's like, use the things that these resources, these kids, or organizations, people have already to kind of further or figure it out. You don't have to be a saint. You don't have to, I mean, I sometimes drink water at nightclubs and things of that sort. You don't have to be this greater than thou person. That you can do what you can on an individual basis. I see these young kids in the front row, for example. I spoke at a children's tolerance fair. This little kid afterwards, he comes up to me, he goes, you know, I'm 5 years old, what am I supposed to do? I go, you know what? Just go get some bubble gum. In your neighborhood, you'll be the bubble gum kid. He goes, what? I go, just get bubble gum and hand out bubble gum in your neighborhood. I run the kid 2 years later, he goes, you know what? I'm the bubble gum kid. Like, I'm the kid that makes everybody happy. I'm doing what I can, but, you know, we all can do something. That's literally what, you know, I preach every day, that you can do something at your level, whatever you can do. To that gentleman's point, you never know what people are going through. Literally, I guarantee you, every single person in here, every single one of us is going through something. When I was living in my car, mine was, someone gave me a buy one, get one free Subway coupon. It was literally, I didn't know how I was gonna eat the next day. This lady didn't know what was going on, this or that. And that buy one, get one free coupon was like, wow, I can eat tomorrow. And that, you know, spurred this or that. So, not to long-winded, to your point, we all can do something.
Absolutely. So before we close, we're going to have a special closing by Angelo Anderson. Angelo is formerly a homeless man who's been working with NEOCH for many years, and also began the Cleveland Street Chronicle, which is a newspaper that's produced and written by people who are homeless and distributed in the city, and then the funds of which go back to the homeless people who run it. I just first want to thank you all for coming. Before I hand my mic over to Angelo, I also want to bring your attention that we did have a donation table for NEOCH in the back, and there is literature available if you're curious about what the needs are or what areas you might be able to support or give help. And to Rick's point, the smallest of gestures can be really meaningful to individuals. I also want to draw your attention to our program calendar, which lists some of our upcoming events. In this calendar, we have the wrong date for the benefit concert. It's Thursday, January 26th, I believe. Not Sunday, but I hope that you will consider coming back and re-engaging with this topic through that benefit for NEOCH. And without further ado, I'd like to turn it over to Angelo.
Thank you. Is this on?
Yep.
Hi. Can you hear me back there?
We're recording it and live casting it, so if you don't use the mic, people at home can't hear it.
Hi, people at home. Listen, 2 things before I read they say I'm a poet now, I don't know. But there's a box up here that we will take the donations for NEOCH. Whether you know it or not, NEOCH is a grassroots organization. Many grassroots organizations are now going under because of funding issues. but it's awareness that keeps us in business. And through that awareness, people give. So please give to the box. And I'm going to ask you to buy paper, 2 different things, your choice. Okay? Having said that, let me get some eyes on so I can see. Last night, I ate chicken wings from the garbage can on 4th Street. It's a good place to find doggy bags from the restaurants on that street. I walked over to the alley next to May Company, got in the corner, slept. Last night I went to a tailgate party, drunk and ate for free. Panhandled some money, went to the hood, got high, then slept in the park until the police woke me up. They told me to move along. Last night I found a bus pass, and I rode the bus all night. Then I went to St. Augustine for breakfast. Last night, I hung out on Public Square. The food people were there and fed us soup with coffee. I went to the alley and slept. Last night, I panhandled on Playhouse Square. Made enough to smoke all night. Walked to breakfast at the church. Last night, I hung out in the flats, swept up off the floor, put the chairs out for a concert, listened to the show, got paid, got high, slept in the bus shelter. Last night, I slept in the emergency room because it was so cold out. I had to leave at 7 when the shift changed. Last night, I went to the men's shelter. They had 75 mats on the floor, a bathroom with 2 sinks and 2 stalls. I won't be back. Last night, I slept in a porta potty. Maybe this will be my last night on the street, God willing.
Where would you like to be? We are going to be down here. Okay.